everyone to our presentation today. It's a pleasure for me to introduce today our guest speaker, Nikhit D'Sa, who is an assistant professor at the University of Notre Dame and director of research at the Global Center for Development of the Whole Child, which is part of the Institute for Educational Initiative here at Notre Dame. Nikhit is a developmental psychologist focusing on education and human development. He has a doctoral degree from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And he and his team, as you will see today, work in the very challenging environment of Haiti. And today he will share the lessons from the years of research with Haiti. We'll have the presentation, then we'll have time for Q&A. And for those of you who are following online, I remind you that you can always submit questions through the presentation using the box that is below your viewing window. So you can collect the questions and then relay them to the speaker of the presentation. Nikhit, welcome to the Kellogg.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, everyone. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. And I think I want to start by just kind of saying, if you read kind of the description for this talk, it talks about kind of my work in Haiti, but none of it is my work, right? Like it's all like our work of a bigger team, of a lot of people involved across multiple different groups of people. So I just wanted to acknowledge that before I start, that this work is a group effort of a lot of different people across the world, really. A really great team at the Global Center for the Development of the Whole Child within IEI, but then also partners, for example, TJ as well from the Pulte Institute, as well as partners in Haiti itself, Catholic Relief Services, who we do a lot of work with, the Catholic Commission for Education in Haiti that runs all of the Catholic schools in Haiti, the Model School Network, which is a group of about 200 schools in the Central Plateau in Haiti, and then Summits Education, which is part of the Model School Network, and Blue Butterfly, all partners that have been part of the broader work that we do in Haiti. And so when I talk about this work, I'm talking about our work and our research in Haiti as a broad group. I'm just standing here on behalf of a lot of people that have done work here at the University of Notre Dame and in Haiti. I also want to acknowledge kind of the donors and the Lego Foundation, Porticus, the Kellogg Foundation, and USAID. At the start, Annabelle asked me if I was going to say a lot about USAID. I am not. If you would like to have a chat about that later, I'm happy to have a conversation about that. We are trying to kind of think about what the future of education and education provision and research about education for children in Haiti looks like without USAID as a funder or a donor in that. And so we are trying to work with a broader collaboration of donors to think about what we can do in terms of kind of moving forward, kind of fairly important needs for children in terms of their learning and development in Haiti without USAID being kind of a pivot point in that picture. So to kind of lay the foundation, to like kind of lay the picture out for you. So I think a lot of people here are very familiar with the situation in Haiti. In about 2015, the then president dissolved parliament, which led to a simmering political crisis that inevitably led to the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in 2021, in July 2021. And gangs that were already pretty powerful in Haiti ended up using that vacuum in political power to take over a lot of the capital, Port-au-Prince. About 80% of the capital is controlled by gangs. All the roads in and out of the capital city are controlled by gangs. And that kind of violence and control radiates out from the capital into most of the departments, of the 10 departments in Haiti. And so movement between parts of Haiti domestically by road is very, very hard. Moving supplies around the country has been very, very hard. There have been a lot of reports of violence, kidnapping, and also especially violence against women as a way of kind of control through scare tactics in Haiti. And on top of all of this, Haiti is also very, very susceptible to natural disasters. There are some estimates that say that about 90% of the population is not ready to face any kind of natural disaster in Haiti, and that addressing the consistent natural disasters in Haiti between 1975 and about 2020 has added up to about 2% of Haiti's GDP every year. So a lot of Haiti's GDP just goes into addressing the natural disasters and crises it has, from the earthquake in 2010, the other earthquake in 2021, and the consistent hurricanes that they go through. And so Paul Farmer described this situation in Haiti as being acute on chronic, kind of an acute set of crises on top of kind of a chronic situation of political fragility in the country. And what this has meant is, as we know, kind of like children living in context of kind of acute or chronic adversity, there is a significant impact on their physiological development, right? Serotonin stress response hormone gets elevated in children who experience kind of consistent community violence, continuous adversity, and have a hard time kind of reconciling that from a physiological perspective. And so we see that in terms of long-term developmental delays and outcomes for children in Haiti. In terms of reported kind of depression and anxiety rates for children are much higher. 2 out of every 3 children report experiencing some type of physical violence, mostly by parents and teachers. And 1 out of every 3 children in Haiti under the age of 5 is not developmentally on track by the age of 5. As a researcher, I don't know how many of you feel this, we're always kind of trained to start with what is the problem, right? Where is the problem that we need to address or do something or research something? And that's what I've done today, is lay out kind of, this is the status of children and child development in Haiti because of kind of the crisis that they're facing. But there is remarkable resilience within communities and families in Haiti, right? All across the country, life still continues. People are getting married, there are celebrations, people are kind of moving on with their lives, going to school. And a lot of what's happening in Haiti in terms of the systems, in terms of kind of the resilience, is built on community systems. So not government-based systems, but systems within communities. And one of the biggest kind of pivot points in those systems in Haiti is actually the Catholic Church. About 80% of the population in Haiti identifies as either Catholic or Christian. The Catholic Church is in all 10 departments in the country. And while about 11 to 14% of public education is provided by the Ministry of Education, the Catholic education system provides about 20 to 22%. So unlike most countries, the private sector actually has a bigger swath of education provision in the country, right? So in the context of fragility and a fragile state like Haiti, there are systems that already are working to kind of fill the gaps in kind of social support and education for children. And I think our role is to think about how do we best support them with what they need to provide the best kind of developmental projections that they can have for children in this context. And so that's where our work comes in, is how do we, as a team at Notre Dame, at CRS, at CC, kind of partner together to think about how the parish system, the Catholic Church system, can be better leveraged in the vacuum of kind of political, social security and social systems in a fragile state like Haiti. And if we can learn through that process, maybe we can think about other parts of the world, like the DRC or CAR or South Sudan, where there might also be other systems, Catholic systems, faith-based systems, other units or systems within fragile states, where we can leverage those to provide kind of the development and education that children require. And so to start kind of from a very simple place in some sense, we take kind of this ecological systems approach to the work we do, right? So we think of kind of, is this familiar? Bunch of circles. So we think of kind of the child in the center, right? And children interacting in the microsystem around them, right? What are the main settings that children interact in all the time around them? The school, the home, maybe their friends group. And then around that is the mesosystem, which is basically the interactions between people in the microsystem. So thinking about kind of PTA, right? Parent-teacher conferences, the parent and the school teacher meet, it's the interaction of two parts of the microsystem of children. And then around that is the exosystem, which is basically the parent's maybe work environment, which doesn't directly interact with the child, but interacts with the child through the parent. And beyond that, we have kind of the broader political system or macro system, and then we have the chronosystem, which is time, right? And a lot of times in emergency situations, we end up providing services and work with children at the microsystem in just kind of one setting for children. Right? So just the school, we're going to do a training, or we're just going to work with parents and do a home visitation program. But really, I think we have enough knowledge to know that while working within the microsystem is great, what's really important is also thinking about how these systems fit together, how the settings and the people across these systems work together to support children's learning and development, right? And so there has been work to kind of take this and extend it out to look at kind of the family system. So what are the family resources, like the personal characteristics of parents and the material resources, and how does that actually influence interactions and patterns of interactions within the family, and then how that actually is affected and affects child development, right? And all this being affected by kind of stressors in the environment. So you can take this and think about extending it to like the friends network of children, the school, the family network, and thinking about how all of these different interactions that children have across the different main settings in their lives interplay and interact with each other and can support children's learning and development. Someone has already done some of that work for us. So the Nurturing Care Framework, which is from the World Health Organization and UNICEF and the World Bank, talks about how we need to think about the interaction of different settings and systems around children, thinking both about health, nutrition, opportunities for learning, responsive caregiving, and safety and security. Right? And their framework talks about the interaction, for example, between safety and security and responsive caregiving, or between opportunities for learning and nutrition. Right? And so what we do in Haiti is we take this and think about within the Catholic Church system within Haiti, within parishes, what does this actually look like? And this is what we've come up with. And Brooke, who's back there taking pictures, helped design this. So thank you, Brooke. But what we're trying to think of is what are the main settings within which children are interacting with every day in Haiti. And the three main settings that we have identified are the home, the school, and the church. That's where children are every day, and that's where they're interacting with every day. And so what we have been trying to do with partners in Haiti is think about within the home, within the school, and within the church, what are kind of levers or intervention points that we can actually change or modify? And how can we align messaging across the three systems, across lakay-lekol-legliz, to affect child development? So it's not just a one-time intervention at one setting for children, but thinking about a much more holistic whole child approach to addressing child development using the Catholic Church system to do that. Y'all with me? Oh, good. Really easy. It looks really, really easy and neat on paper. It's not. So let's think about kind of the different systems and settings, right? So if we think of l'école, which is the school, a lot of what we do is within preschools and within primary schools, right? So within the primary schools, we've worked previously on kind of scripted literacy and social emotional learning program for grades 1 and 2. And then we've also worked on morning meetings that focus on social emotional learning for children. And all of this has also led to a focus on kind of accelerated reading for children, especially in Haitian Creole, to advance children's learning so that they can move through school, through their program. But in doing all of this work, we've also realized that there's a big gap in there, right? One of the big challenges that children in Haiti face is nutrition. And so we're now moving into work to think about, okay, we can do work with teachers in terms of kind of provision of scripted curriculum for literacy and social emotional learning. But if children don't have proper nutrition within the school, in the meals they receive or the meals they bring to school, that's not going to be supportive of their broader development. So how can we align that at the school level? We're also learning that while focusing just on work with teachers is great, the entire school environment sometimes needs to be addressed. And so how do we work with principals and the rest of the teachers to address kind of school culture and empowerment for both school teachers as well as the directors of the school? At the parish level, we're looking at taking what we're learning at the school and embedding it within the entire parish, right? So during the pandemic, we took the scripted literacy curriculum and the SEL curriculum, the social emotional learning curriculum, and converted it into 60 radio programs for children from 3 to about 8 years old. And we used the church and community radio system in Haiti to broadcast those radio programs to all children. Then we also worked with parish priests themselves to think about leverage points within their own service for children. So for example, almost all parents attend baptism counseling before they have a child or after they have a child before baptism. So can we embed child development messages within baptism counseling for parents? And then can we even go one step further or earlier, and instead of waiting until priests and sisters are in their parishes, can we address kind of their training when they're in the seminaries and embed child development messages within their broader spiritual training so that it becomes one part of what they do in both kind of their spiritual work, but also their work in terms of the development of children. And then at the home, we kind of take the messaging that we've done now in school and in the parish with the radio programs and through the baptism counseling, and we embed that within trainings for parents. So we work with parents to develop trainings to focus on early childhood development, positive parenting, playful parenting practices, and we have now a 10-session parent training program that's being rolled out across multiple departments. And so the idea is we layer interventions and make sure the messaging across the interventions are the same, all focused on child development. The question is, like, how do we understand what's happening in this system and actually learn through that process? And so through all of these different intervention approaches that I've talked about, most of them were developed in partnership with teachers or in partnership with the parish priest or in partnership with community members. And we develop them iteratively and build small mini research studies into each of those. Very quick studies to understand, are we moving in the right direction? And if we're not, why not? Let's like go back to the drawing board and rethink it. And then slowly, iteratively kind of designing this out over about 4 or 5 years across several different parishes with parents and with teachers and with children. And so today what I'm going to talk about next is just like a snippet of some of that research that we've been doing to understand what the effect of this is on children and children's development. Ooh, okay, still with me? Okay. Now we're moving to like the research side of things. So TJ is probably better suited to talk about this. But before we started all of this work, one of the pieces of work we were doing is specifically in primary school grades 1 and 2, where we were looking at kind of a scripted Haitian Creole curriculum. And we did a randomized control trial over a 1.5-year period where we found quite significant effects on both children's kind of letter recognition and reading fluency. But in doing that, one of the things that we found was that children were starting school, first grade, without being able to identify any letters, without any word recognition at all. And so if we wanted children to be able to start learning when they get into first grade, we have to start even earlier. And so we ended up doing that and focusing much more on preschools. And so we now have a preschool literacy program, as well as a preschool social emotional learning program that focuses much more on kind of emotional development and social development for children, trying to address kind of those adverse effects that we were talking about at the start of this presentation. And so we finished two randomized controlled trials in Haiti, which is a challenge in and of itself, is trying to do a randomized controlled trial in an emergency. One in the south in Grand Anse, which is in the south of Haiti, and one in the north of Haiti. The first one was focused on children's social emotional learning, where over a 6-month period, we saw really marked effects on kind of children's empathy, perspective taking, conflict resolution skills. And then we replicated that in the north. One of the first social emotional learning replication studies to say, okay, we found something in one part of Haiti, can we now replicate it and do it elsewhere? And in doing that, what we've tried to do is also understand, like, why do we think these pieces are working, both for literacy and social emotional learning. And in a lot of the monitoring data that we've been collecting for this work, we find that the coaching visits that teachers get, so we support teachers by doing a training for them and then visiting them and giving them in-person coaching in their classrooms, those coaching visits are very strongly associated with them being able to implement the work well, or implement the curriculum well, which is like, yes, of course. And better implementation is related to stronger outcomes for children. And so one of the levers then that we can work with the CEC, which is in charge of kind of Catholic education in Haiti, is how do we build better coaching into their systems itself, right? So that we have training for teachers, but then kind of continuous professional development for teachers through training programs. In 2026-28, we're moving more into kind of the nutrition and school culture area. So we don't have research on this, but stay tuned because we're going to do some more work on this soon. And mirroring that, we're also building a lot more work with parents around nutrition to understand how we can improve nutrition at the home as well, so that it's not just nutrition focused on the home or the school, but it becomes kind of a combined approach of like the same messaging on nutrition happening at the home and the school. But one of the things that happened during the pandemic really early on was parents came to us, especially more mothers, and said, you know, we're feeling really left out. We're feeling like we don't have our like group, our social group anymore. I'm sure nobody in this room felt that way during the pandemic. But parents came and told us this, especially mothers, and they were like, we need something. Help us like get together somewhere. And so being researchers, we were like, what does the literature say? And the literature from Bangladesh, there was one study that showed that just calling up moms and talking to them for half an hour every week was really strongly predicted with lower stress levels for them. We were like, okay, would this be something you would be interested in? And a group of 30 moms said yes. So we did that. And we did a small study over 3 months with them. And then we had a group of mothers who were not part of the program. And what we found was that mothers' stress levels actually increased after these calls over 3 months. And so we were like, what is going on? So we went back and we interviewed the moms and we were like, what is happening? Can you help us explain why we're finding this? And the mothers were like, it's great to get your calls, but it doesn't really address what we wanted to address, which is social connection. So how do we build social connection? And so that led us to thinking about, okay, can we get groups of mothers together in a safe way to help them talk to each other about child development and the resources that they have in their own community. And that has now led to a 10-session parent training program, both mothers and fathers, where we talk about the same messaging that we do in the church and in the school, right? So positive parenting practices or positive discipline practices, nutrition, early childhood development, playful, like early literacy. And we did a small study with about 24 mothers where we interviewed all of them. And 22 of the 24 noted kind of a reduction in corporal punishment in their homes over that period. 20 of the mothers mentioned kind of improved overall family well-being. 16 of the 24 mothers talked about using more nutritious food in their home. And 15 of them said, I've stopped shouting now. And we also took all of this qualitative data from before the training and after, and we did sentiment analysis on it, which is basically trying to understand like what are the words that parents are using, and do they have more of a positive or a negative valence? And before the training, we found a lot more words like insult, scream, punish, wrong, violent, using kind of describing their interactions with children. And after the program, we saw a drop in a lot of kind of the negatively valent words and much more on the positive end. This is a very, very small study, but it's one of the examples of like, we're trying to get some kind of indicator research to show us, are we moving in the right direction? Because the next step with this, hopefully, over the next few years, is to do a proof of concept and impact evaluation to understand, like, is the parent training program actually causally affecting parents' own practices, and does that actually benefit children's development? So that's the next step. And then at the church level, at the parish level, a lot of the work that we've been doing is focused on radio programs. And we've seen, just because of the amount of data that we collect with communities, we're able to track radio usage in the communities. And what we found was at the start of the pandemic, when we were sending out radio programs over 12 weeks, fairly high listenership. And by the end of the pandemic, when we had another set of radio programs go out, the listenership dropped quite considerably. Now, there are many explanations for this. One of the big explanations is actually there was a petrol shortage, a gas shortage. And so the radio stations, which had generators that run on gas, could not find gas to run the radio stations. And so the frequency of the radio programs dropped. And so parents didn't feel like they could consistently listen to the radio programs. And so even radio programming, which was kind of the foundational pillar of distance learning for children in Haiti, we need to now rethink how we do distance learning for children in Haiti within a crisis. So this gives us an indication of not necessarily always just relying on our perspective of what might be best, but kind of investing in like understanding what might actually be working for families and communities. And if not, why not? How do we change this? The other piece that we've also been moving forward is kind of seminarian training and baptism training. This is still very, very nascent, and we've just started this work. But we're seeing some very positive notes from the interviews that we're doing with seminarians about them being able to start including some of the child development messaging and positive discipline messaging into the work that they're doing during their 6-month internships, during their seminarian training with parishes in the north. And one of the things I think that I'm guessing most of you are wondering now is, say, Nikhit, you started by talking about kind of the microsystem and interventions at the microsystem, but really we need to be thinking about how all of these interventions kind of come together and engage with each other and understanding the impact of the entire L3 system instead of individual components. We're still working on it. I think what we've tried to do is build evidence across the L3 about what we know about each of these components as much as we can. And we've done a small kind of qualitative impact protocol study. And this study is basically, the easiest way to describe it is it's a double-blind qualitative study. Right? So basically, let's say all of you have been to this workshop, and 3 weeks from now, someone from the University of Notre Dame calls you up and is like, what's changed in your perspective about child development in Haiti over the last 3 weeks? And you might say, well, I learned a lot more. And then that person might say, why do you think it's changed? And hopefully you talk about this topic, right? So the same thing is what we do in Haiti, where we might have we go into communities several months after we finished kind of working there, and we hire a team of researchers who know nothing about our work, and we send them to the community to just talk to parents about what's changed in how you're treating your children or how your children are developing over the last year, and why do you think that's changed? What do you attribute that to? So the parents are blind to the fact that we want information about the L3, and the researchers are also blind to the fact that parents have participated in the L3. We then unblind parents and researchers, and then they have a conversation about the L3 itself. Right? And so that gives us some kind of perceived impact to understand, are parents and priests and children and teachers talking about these different components and hopefully talking about how they interact? I think what we found was what we're mostly seeing is parents are talking about the most kind of visual things, right? The most near-term things that touch their lives, like the parent training. It's a very kind of stark thing that parents have to attend, like 10 sessions. They have a lot of fun through it. They get some packages of food to take home. So parents really remember that. But a sermon that a priest might give in church may not be remembered as well as a parent training. So what we're struggling with is thinking about how do we capture these kind of near-term, kind of really directed interventions and their impact, and then these more distal interventions and how they might interact together. So we're starting to get some of that information through these methods, but this is still someplace where we really need to be thinking more. And that's why I'm also going to kind of open this up to everyone here. Say, do you have any ideas of how we should be trying to kind of understand this better? The next step in our work is really, we have plans to evaluate the parent training program in a much more rigorous way. We're developing and pilot testing kind of a deeper approach to children's social emotional learning, especially in primary school, and focus more on kind of school culture and safety. And we're also thinking about how do we better streamline all of these different pieces of the L3 so that messaging becomes much more consistent across the different pieces rather than just within the different components. And lastly, I think a question for me, a question for everyone here is if you have thoughts, ideas of like, how would you approach studying this? How would you approach kind of thinking about the interactions between these different systems and the impact that it has on children's learning and development? That's where we are. That's where I'm going to kind of pause for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhit. I will let you fill the question.
Yeah. The question about other institutions that you may have seen working in these environments. So not necessarily the church, but could be related to the church. What kind of activities do these other institutions generate for parents and or for children? And how do you see the systems driving or the logic driving those institutions interacting with these micro level dynamics?
Yeah. Is it okay if I take a few questions and then respond to them? Please.
I'm not exactly sure if this question is going to make sense, but I'm just curious. I mean, because you're working in Haiti, if you anticipate, so just kind of thinking about applying this same project in a different place, if it might be more effective in a place like Haiti because you have less competition for, I guess, like messaging. I'm assuming there are fewer organizations on the ground with other like, kind of ideological approaches or beliefs about parenting or whatever. So I'm just kind of curious about if you think that this is kind of like a very distilled or, you know, like incredibly strong, the outcomes might be very strong in Haiti for the reasons you mentioned.
I had a comment and then also a question. So when you pose to us, how would we test the interactions? And so my idea is really simplistic. So I guess it's a comment, but what I'm expecting you to say is this is why we can't do this, and then reveal some of what you're actually thinking about testing interactions. So I imagine this isn't possible to do because it would be too resource intensive, but you could do randomized controlled tests with different dyads of treatments or larger constellations of treatments. It would be you have so many different treatments that it would be hugely complex to test all of them, but maybe you could do RCTs for particular dyads that would be especially interesting. So that's my simplistic idea, and I'm curious, if that's a route you're taking or why you wouldn't take it. And then the other thing is, so I'm a political scientist, so what comes to mind is, the challenge that these very worthwhile programs always face in the long term of how is this affecting the ability of the state to eventually, like the Ministry of Education, to eventually, hopefully, in a more stable, less violent Haiti, to play the role that states usually do of providing, effective primary education and promoting childhood development. So I was curious, just sort of ethically, how you're thinking about that. Clearly, your program is needed for the current context, but what are you thinking about the longer term and the risk of having a negative impact on a potential future for a state role in performing these sort of typical state functions?
Yeah. So maybe I'll respond to those three questions and then I can take another. Forget if I go more than three, I forget. Oh, please.
My friend Juan Valdez was heading the UN mission for 5 years. He asked, what is your ultimate conclusion? He said, too many NGOs, not enough state. And he thought that was a negative spiral. And the thing that he said we had to do was to build up the state. And we're never going to get out of this unless we do effectively build up the nation state.
Yeah. So let me kind of respond to each of those, and I will acknowledge as I started that I'm here representing kind of a very large team. I'm going to try and do my best, but I might not always be the best person, especially to respond to the last question. But in terms of kind of activities from other institutions, I think we're very, very cognizant about kind of taking like a whole child approach can't be done by one institution, one group, one set of people, right? So that's why like at the start, I put up several different organizations and there are more too, right? So for example, the radio programs that we did weren't developed only by us. They were developed in partnership with Blue Butterfly. That's a collaborative that works to develop kind of a lot of kind of technology-based solutions for children in Haiti. So we're constantly looking for what are other people doing that we can bring into this or kind of grow from or use if it's already there. The other thing is we take a kind of a very open source approach to all of this. So all of our materials are, we send it out to all of our contacts in Haiti. So if we develop a scripted literacy curriculum, it's on our website and it's freely downloadable for anybody in Haiti and around the world. And so we do that for like everything. All of our radio programs, if you go to the Global Center website right now, you can find all 60 of them. All the books are on there, all of it. So I think what we see is more of like that the knowledge that is created through all of this doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the communities in Haiti, and we have to make sure that it kind of gets back there. And so we take a similar approach with kind of partnering with other institutions and other actors in Haiti. The second question, is it more effective? So my background is primarily working in emergencies. So before I joined the University of Notre Dame, I was the director of research for education emergencies at Save the Children. And Haiti is not unique in some sense, right? South Sudan, DRC, Chad to some extent, Yemen. There's a lot of places where the fragility of kind of state actors means that there are lots more kind of civil society organizations and community organizations that have filled that role. So yes, I would agree in some sense that maybe we're more effective because we aren't kind of all competing for the same kind of piece of work. But I would say if there were other folk who were doing this work in Haiti, maybe we would not be needed or required, right? So I would say we would probably need to step away as well and focus on areas where this work might be more needed. So I think our goal is to say, in this situation, what can we learn that we can then make as open source as possible for communities that are doing this elsewhere, where state actors might not be as present or evident. And then in terms of the last question, So first, in terms of the A/B testing, or kind of testing multiple arms, like that would be what we would want to do, but it is very resource intensive. And partially, I think the challenge of mobility within Haiti has kind of restricted us in terms of being able to do that. But partly just also finances and being able to kind of study something like that across multiple arms. But that would be something that we would want to be able to do at some point. So I think what we've tried to do more is look at kind of outcome harvesting, outcome mapping, and using other ways of like having a clear theory of change and then mapping that out to see if we're seeing the indicators or impacts across kind of that theory of change. So we're using much more kind of qualitative program evaluation approaches to understand that. But the hope is that if someone would like to finance multi-arm RCT, well, we would never do all of this. Like this would be too many arms. But even like a 3-arm trial or a 4-arm trial is very hard. So I think it's definitely on top of mind of like how we would do this. And yes, like doing some kind of multi-arm study would be the preferred approach. But in a context where we can't do that, we're also trying to figure out like, are there other people who are doing kind of similar research that we should be talking to, right? Like what's our blind spot is my question to all of you. And then to the last question, how much should I say about the ministry? Is this being recorded? So I agree with that is a constant kind of question that we have on our team. And I think partly what we're trying to do is make sure that the CEC, which is the Catholic Commission for Education in Haiti, are the ones who kind of live with all of the knowledge and expertise that we have. Right? So we want to like be able to leave all of that with them. So a lot of the work that we do is actually building this into their systems. So that, and they work directly with the Ministry of Education. So they follow the Ministry of Education curriculum, the Ministry of Education calendar. And so hopefully, at some point when the Ministry of Education is taking up more of it, the CEC would work with the Ministry of Education to build some of that into the Ministry of Education's work. I don't see my role as being able to do that right now. I think there's a whole set of actors from kind of the World Bank, IADB, GPE that are already working with the ministry. But it's really hard for us as a kind of tiny group of people working in Haiti to be able to kind of influence the ministry in that. Not a satisfactory answer, I know, but I don't think I'm the best to even speak about that.
The point about knowledge transfer is really key. I mean, I think that's a key solution.
Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Nikhit. Super interesting. I really found fascinating some of your kind of the evolution of your learning that you talked about through the different kind of rapid cycle testing approaches that you've taken. As you think about what to test and how to test it, the story that you told about like stress with the mothers and the calls not working and then moving towards more collaborative approaches that then built both community and parenting skills. And then this is what's showing up pretty loud in the qualitative double-blinded evaluation that you're doing, as opposed to perhaps the like sermons from the priests, which is just like, I'm kind of processing and thinking about some of your learnings, and we worked together on a lit review about some of the use of messaging from religious leaders. And it strikes me like, I wonder if you're learning things about optimal mechanisms and like where you can get powerful dosage, and even like what are the ways that the church can best be engaged. Like some of the data, some of the research that we had looked at was using religious leaders, like Muslim religious leaders in Islamic countries where there was like an anti-vaccine sentiment. So you actually had like a really clear barrier, and then the trust of the religious leader was a key mechanism to overcoming that barrier. I wonder if we have the same dynamic in Haiti where parents really do want to do what's best for their kids and they just don't really know. So it's not like I don't know if you have the same like message, like value add with the religious leader, and is the best role for the seminarians when they become parish priests or for the current parish priests to just host these parent groups? You know, so like which levers to pull, which mechanisms to pull, and I think as you're moving deeper into the systems in this really interesting way, you might be learning what those optimal pressure points are and maybe where parts of your theory of change, while still promising, could be pivoted and evolved as you learn.
So I had back there.
Thank you very much. I thought it was a fascinating presentation. I want to focus just a little bit on TJ's question, but I was thinking about the relationship between family, church, and school.
Yeah.
And in a context where you're really looking exclusively at Catholic schools. And so I'm kind of curious about this school-church relationship, because you can imagine there are times when they're completely separate. There's a school way out that does its own stuff. You can imagine there's others that are really very closely associated with church and that really have a very, very strong impact on it. And kind of just, you know, how does that those kind of relationships, thinking about the importance of these relationships, figure into the work that you're doing?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. My question is also related to the relationship between the church and school and the parents, but what I'm thinking about is related to how well their messaging sort of fit with each other. So have you encountered a scenario where the church might have a different message that it wants to send, different from what the parents want to send, right? And so in a scenario like that, or they might even disagree with you on what emotional learning is, right? The way you want to, the message they want to put across might not necessarily fit with what the parents want or what the church wants, right? And so I wonder, in a scenario like that, how do you ensure that there is consistent messaging from the various actors so that the kids are not getting different messaging from different sources, right? And then it actually is counterproductive or probably harmful to your growth.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So let me take these three questions. So TJ, kind of, I really resonate with what you just said, because I think we've been struggling with this idea of kind of what we might call kind of like distal effects of programming and more proximal. And I think when we're talking about kind of the parent training programs, the work that we do in schools, there's a much more proximal, like direct effect on children. I think with the work that we're doing with the parish priests and with the sisters, it's a much more distal effect. And I think we are, in some sense, in our theory of change, we're not expecting them to directly impact children, right? So if we go back to that kind of Bronfen-Brunner micro, meso, exo system, we see them as being kind of the key levers at that meso system, right? So at the micro system, you have the parents directly interacting with the child. At the school, you have teachers and head teachers and other children directly interacting with children. But then the teachers go and talk to maybe the parish priest, the parents go and talk to the parish priest. And so we want that messaging to be much clearer, so that when a priest or a sister enters their community, the first thing they should probably be saying is, where is your parent training program? Or like, how do we build child development messaging into this new initiative we're rolling out? So that they're the ones kind of, in terms of kind of making sure that the knowledge and the expertise stays in Haiti, they're the ones kind of championing child development through their work. And I think that's something that we haven't gotten to yet. I think that's the work that we still need to be able to do better in some sense. So I resonate a lot with what you said. In terms of like the closeness of the church and the school, the church has been very important in distance learning and the initiatives that we're trying to move. So even though the church runs the school, when the Ministry of Education says all schools are closed, the school closes, but the church still remains open. So our thing was, can we leverage the church grounds to host learning opportunities for kids when the school might be closed, but there is no security risk in that community at that time for children, right? So we have piloted resource centers. So within each church, having digital resources and a resource center with a community management plan attached to it to make sure that kind of learning can continue when the formal kind of school system is closed. And a lot of that negotiation happens because resources tend to be more protected when they're on the parish ground. So if we have a solar panel for a community resource center, if it's attached to the church building, it's more protected just by the fact that it's attached to the church building. So I think in terms of like the closeness of the church and the school, a lot of it is kind of negotiating that piece is what can we do when schools are closed, but that the church is still open and still working and it's safe for children to come to the church grounds. And the last question about kind of what if there's a mismatch between messaging? I think so far we haven't found too much of that. And I think that might be to some extent because we're working with fairly young children. We're working with kind of 0 to 8. I think if we go into older ages, there's probably going to be more mismatch between messaging. But so far with the younger children, we found we've developed kind of a set of videos with ND Learning here. Brooke helped us a lot with that to make sure we kind of get messaging around kind of early childhood development and brain development, the importance of kind of serve and return parenting, the importance of nutrition. And those videos have resonated with parish priests and with parents, and they're on board about that. So I think that overall messaging there hasn't been a mismatch. I think it's the same piece as I was saying to TJ. It's like, how do we make sure that becomes like discourse? And like, I think that step is the one that we're still like, what is the lever for that messaging across systems to become kind of embedded within the discourse of the community itself? So everybody's talking about it, and it's not a thing that has to be pushed. It's just like happens through the community. Yeah. Please.
Thank you for a terrific presentation. One of the sort of actors that often gets brought up when we talk about Haiti is, of course, non-state armed actors, gangs. International media have sort of portrayed Haiti as a country that is now governed by gangs. And so I'm curious to what extent gang governance and gang activity have affected your programming, whether that's, sort of being a risk or a threat to what you all are doing, or whether you've sort of built efforts to strengthen community resilience in the face of these non-state armed actors within the types of interventions that you all have been coordinating.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So my question is for the Parents Empowerment Program. I just want to know if there are parents that have resisted the program and what efforts are being taken to integrate them into the program. And then the second question I have is whether maybe as a result from the stress levels of mothers, whether poverty was identified, their economic situations, and whether there are efforts that are being taken to improve their economic situations going forward.
Thanks for the presentation. I just have to ask the question about history and politics and positionality. Essentially, it's a question about the positionality of the researchers working in the project. Things like education, natalism have been very charged domains for Haitians for hundreds of years. And the United States does not have a very laudatory presence in Haiti since its founding. And so I wonder about how when you talk about engaging with communities, how you're conceptualizing the idea of community and also about how you're thinking about the positionality of your, the work you're doing. Communities are power laden. There are people, I think the question about the competing messages of the church and of parents is quite important given the division in the Catholic Church since the 1980s, really, and I just wonder how you approach those sort of more knotty political questions in the really great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
know what the first question was again.
Gangs.
Oh, yes. That's why I didn't remember. So we have not, as far as I can recall, we have not directly interacted with any of the gangs in any negotiations. I think partly our colleagues at CRS, who were based in Port-au-Prince, have had to in some sense because a lot of them were based in Port-au-Prince. The biggest kind of issue for us has been mobility. As a faculty member or staff of the University of Notre Dame, I am not allowed to go to Haiti. So doing work and research in Haiti without being able to go to Haiti is my response to the third question, which is a deep identity crisis for me as someone who's worked in emergencies most of my life. And so I think that's something that we're trying to work on, is how do we negotiate with the situation with gangs is not something that we can directly affect right now, but we're working in communities that are maybe far enough away. We might not have direct gang influence. We have our security protocols in place. How do we kind of make sure that we are also able to go and do the work that communities are either asking for or that we think that we want to kind of propose to them. But mobility has been the biggest issue. So when we were working in the south of the country during kind of 2022, right after the assassination of the president, we couldn't get any supplies through because all of the roads from Port-au-Prince and the main port were controlled by gangs. So we had to kind of see if we could get a barge from DR around to one of the ports in the south of the country. So there's been a lot of kind of logistical navigation that's had to happen. In terms of the parent engagement program and parents who weren't to resist dads, fathers have been really hard to bring into the parent engagement program. And so we've worked with some fathers to design a program that they think other fathers would enjoy and like to be at. So that's what we're piloting right now, is a fathers empowerment program specifically for fathers, because fathers were telling us that this is for the mothers, not for us. So that's the group that we've been working to kind of try and bring in more into that conversation. And in terms of kind of financial situation, there are limits to kind of what we have been able to do in the financial kind of situation in Haiti. We have worked with a couple of alumni from the University of Notre Dame. I don't know all of the details about this, but my understanding is they own the franchise for Mailboxes Incorporated, which is kind of UPS, but for Haiti. So we worked with them to set up Mailboxes Incorporated in Haiti as a social enterprise, where the profits from that goes back into the parish. So that would fund kind of tuition for children who can't pay and the salaries for teachers. So it's basically using Mailboxes Incorporated and the profits from that as a way to kind of address what families and teachers were telling us, which was we can't afford the tuition for school and we're not being paid on time. And so that's something that we're still working on, that we're trying to kind of move forward. We have one Mailbox Incorporated, I think, in Cap-Haïtien that's up and running. But I think we're still trying to figure out what that looks like in terms of kind of creating a plan so that the finances are transparently given to the parishes. There's a management plan for how decisions would be made about the finances. So there's lots of layers on that. And I'm not directly involved in that, so that's why it's a little bit hard for me to give details on. Power and positionality. It is a challenge. It's a challenge for the work that we do in Haiti. We have a group of staff that are based in Haiti. They hired as consultants from the University of Notre Dame, but they've been kind of long-term collaborators for probably the last 5 or 6 years. They've been working with us on this. And so they are our community liaisons. So we work through Haitians within the community. So it's not directly me going to a community and saying, you need this, but it's rather them approaching the community and saying, we've been doing this with X parish. Would you be interested in kind of joining up on this and thinking about it? Normally through the parish priest, and then they meet the parish leaders and make a decision. We also try as much as possible to set up kind of community management groups everywhere. So for the digital resource centers, for the mailboxes incorporated, it all goes through kind of community management groups that are managed by the community, not by us. So our role we see is kind of trying to kind of move as much as possible over to the community with complete acknowledgement that there's a huge kind of power dynamic here and privilege dynamic that I don't know personally how to completely let go of. So it's something that I think our entire team struggles with. And I think primarily what we're trying to do is work with and through Haitians for Haiti in some sense. Any other questions?
I had a question, sorry, I got a little emergency call there, but with the dwindling reach of the Catholic Church, or Haiti having what used to be a dominantly Catholic country, and it's in the urban areas becoming increasingly more Protestant, particularly in the earthquake affected areas.
Yeah.
What are your just thoughts about the role of the church, the Catholic Church remaining as a primary vehicle for making these connections, and how much diversification will be required to reach what is now, in some of the years where I worked, dominantly Protestant populations, which was not the case for the earthquake?
A follow-up comment. So I'm really continuing to think about the testing multiple treatments at once. So two possible suggestions. One is to take advantage of what I'll call failures, which I'll explain in a minute, and the other is exogenous shocks. So no program is implemented perfectly. So can you go back and look to see where there were failures? Where did that, in that one parish, was that one priest just not giving the sermons he was supposed to give? So anyway, then you could get variation across geography, and you would have an accidental controlled experiment for where the treatment didn't occur in some areas and not others. The other thing is, I was wondering, in terms of an exogenous shock, across time, could you look for variation because of the pandemic? So during the pandemic, were there certain treatments that you wanted to do, but you couldn't, whereas you were running others? And then if you have data across time in terms of the outcomes, can you use variation across time to have, the 3 treatments at this time and only 2 at that time? And with that, I don't know if that would be helpful.
Yeah, I like both those ideas, and we hadn't really considered, especially looking at like failures within implementation as being kind of an implementation in itself. So that's something I'll definitely take back to the team, and I don't think they'll be very happy with me talking about failures. But yes, with like a lot of failures, and yes, we should be able to use them to understand how things are working as well. And in terms of kind of the Protestant church, so we had started some mapping with different denominations as well in the USA. I think for us, it would be working with and through CECs to see if we can like move some of that knowledge over to others as well. Because the CEC has been a really kind of a powerful collaborator in all of this. I think they do have a very strong voice in Haiti, and especially with other religious groups, especially coming from the education side of the church and not being as necessarily directly tied to the doctrine. So we haven't done that yet, but I think that's how I would approach it.
It was interesting, and even the strength of faith and attendance was higher in some of those because they were newly evangelized, and there was a lot of, I think, so that was a pathway that we saw as being really particularly powerful for things like risk reduction programming, things like that, because some of them were attending church daily, very actively mobilized with the pastor and the church group. So we thought, okay, this is a mechanism that even if they don't have formal school systems attached in the way the Catholic Church did, it could be a vehicle for some of this in an ad hoc fashion, at least wrapped around other programming the church is doing.
Yeah.
Please. Just on this is a fantastic project, and every piece of the project would have justified a presentation. It's clear that there are lots of lessons here, right? And I was curious about lessons in 2 ways. If you can elaborate a bit more. One is in relation to the question about the state and in the question about in relation to other churches. I guess my first question is, what are the lessons that you find across the project that are scalable in the sense that some of the things that you are learning could be implemented by the state, could be implemented by other community groups, right? That could be implemented beyond the Catholic Church and the network of organizations you work with. And that's kind of more in terms of the policy lesson, so to speak. And then in terms of social science, you mentioned the story about the calls that produced the opposite result that you expected, which I found super interesting. I was wondering if you have any other examples of situations in which you went into a design building based on the existing literature, and then you learned something that was different.
Do you want to know more about failures?
Yeah.
That's what you're asking us about.
Or rather, theoretical lessons, things that you learn from the research that you did not expect based on the previous research.
Maybe I'll just take those. So lessons across the project. I think one of the kind of the biggest lessons is just around kind of support for teachers. With any of this work that we've been doing in schools, and this is one of the things that I don't think is very groundbreaking in some sense. Like I think everybody here understands kind of the stress that teachers are facing. But with any kind of implementation in schools, having kind of dedicated professional development or continuous professional development for teachers that is supportive of not just kind of their immediate needs, but also the needs that will come up because of them implementing this, like building that into the system takes a lot of kind of resources and thought. But what we've seen is that is a very successful or impactful lever to be able to make sure that the intervention itself can be successful in some sense. And so there has been like previous approaches to professional development, of course, in Haiti, but I think with the CEC, what we're trying to do is embed it more within their systems so that there's a very, maybe even data-driven way for them to think about professional development. So we do have kind of observation forms now that all of the supervisors fill out, and it gives them cues at the end of what to talk to the teacher about based on what observations they had. So we're trying to kind of build more of that kind of data-driven coaching for teachers into the system itself. So that I think is kind of one big piece. The second piece is around kind of parent engagement and parent training. We haven't been able to do kind of the kind of study we still want to do to understand the overall impact of that. But the amount of interest from parents has been overwhelming in some sense, especially mothers. There's a lot of kind of like, yes, we need more of this. We want to kind of like take this to other parishes. We've had mothers kind of come together and say, can we take this to a different parish? So there has been a lot of kind of much more interest in parent training. So for me, that's more of a lesson of like, there has been this gap that parents are identifying themselves. Is it the parent training that's the best thing for that? Or is there something else, right? I don't know. Like, is it that they're just thirsty for more of this information, and is the parent training the best piece or something? I don't know that, but there is definitely like something there that I'm like, this is something that like I would suggest the CEC or the government think more about, like, how do we support parents? Because obviously they want more of this.
This is a small comment just based on that. I think you're right, and it reminds me that your response, Nikhit, about like the role that you were envisioning for the priests and this idea of like, what you want is for the dialogue to continue. And so I sent you this interesting scaling framework that talks about like ownership, like things get so institutionalized and the ownership is so high that then it begins to be continually adaptive. And then thinking of scaling in not just in terms of breadth or expansion, but of like institutionalization and then kind of the gradual ongoing iterative processes. I think it's really interesting what you said about like just feeling where there's electricity in the system for that kind of momentum would be an interesting way of thinking about scale.
Yeah. And then in terms of failures, well,
learning.
I believe in talking about failures as learning, like fail, like we only learn from our mistakes. But for me, like a big failure was like distance learning. And that's something where like, I think we still have a lot to learn. I think over COVID, the focus on distance learning across the world was amazing. It took on a very kind of ed tech focus, because in a lot of places, there was a lot of education technology, there was a lot of access to digital resources, electricity, tablets. In Haiti, we've had a very hard time being able to move the needle towards ed tech. And radio programs were like one way where we thought it could be really successful. They've been used successfully in Haiti previously. But what we found was even with radio programs, it's been really, really hard to move the needle on providing any kind of distance learning for children in Haiti. And so, especially compared to the broader literature around distance learning, Haiti stands out to me as a stark example of some place where we need to rethink how we're doing distance learning for children. Because of the resources, because of the context. And I believe that could be probably taken to other contexts as well. I don't think it's Haiti specific. There are lots of places in the world where there is kind of digital fragility in some sense that this could fill the gap in. But I don't think we've spent enough time to think about, like, is it the parish priest who we need to be leveraging as kind of the point of distance learning within each parish? Like, or is it a community leader within each parish that becomes kind of the distance learning champion and have some kind of tree format that they roll out to children when schools are closed? We haven't done that. Like, I think that's like the next step of like what we need to be working with communities to think about what do we do when schools are closed. Sorry.
This is an extremely complicated place, right? But number one, would you say that the children that are somehow in your network are, relatively speaking, the better off children in the country?
I might not say they're better off, but they're probably in safer areas in the country. So I think the areas where
that's a definition of being better off.
yeah. No, but like I would say not financially better off, but probably more secure than children in Port-au-Prince, definitely. Yeah.
Now, when you compare, you listed a few countries. And you added, you put in Chad, Yemen, you could add, I don't know, Burundi. How does Haiti compare with that? Would you say that the situation in Haiti is extraordinarily so bad that it's the worst in the world, aside from Sudan?
Well, it's according to the fragility index, it's the 9th most fragile context in the world. So it's only kind of trumped by Afghanistan, Yemen, Sudan, South Sudan, DRC, Syria, and Chad, I believe. So in 2000, and that was 2024. So like, I don't know how to characterize fragility in one place next to the other, but like some other people have figured it out, and they would say that Haiti is a fairly fragile place. And I think this is a challenge that we face with a lot of emergency funding, is Haiti is not seen as an emergency. And so a lot of donors don't think that like emergency funding doesn't end up in Haiti. There's some GP funding that ends up in Haiti, but a lot of kind of the broader education emergencies funding doesn't end up going to Haiti because it's not categorized as an emergency, because it's just a chronic state of fragility. But I would argue that yes, like there is enough fragility in Haiti that it seems comparable to a lot of the other contexts where education is in an emergency. So
I think we have time for one more question.
I was just going to give a suggestion, and feel free to take it. So I'm Nigerian, and during the pandemic, we also had the same problem with accessing learning opportunities, digital access and all of that. And so I did a research with UNESCO at the time, and we discovered that a lot of children couldn't have access to online learning because of electricity issues, and even the rising cost of data at the time. And so we had to look for local solutions. And so one of the solutions that we proposed, because it was a group project, was getting, because in different communities, there are people who volunteer, who maybe students who are looking for volunteer jobs, but then it's a paid position where they come together, bring children together, and then they teach them. I mean, that was like a makeshift solution to, doing the online learning. So in different communities, that was one of the solutions that we proposed, because most of these places were rural in nature. They didn't have access to electricity or even internet. So that's one of the solutions. So I'm just suggesting that.
Yeah. Is that, have you written up about this so where we could read more about it?
Yes, but it hasn't been published by UNESCO yet. So
is there an early draft that they're fine with you sharing with us?
no, they're not actually.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you.